Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jack Daly, Director of the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, and it's my honor to welcome you this evening to the 9th Annual John Glenn Lecture. Since it was inaugurated in 2004, this lecture stands out as one of the most popular events of our annual calendar, and tonight is no exception. In addition to the hundreds of people who secured tickets to be with us this evening, thousands more will be watching on our webcast. As it was last year, the lecture is made possible through the generous support of the Boeing Company. Over the years, Boeing has partnered with the Smithsonian on many important projects, including construction of the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center. The building's central hangar is named the Boeing Aviation Hangar in recognition of this support. Representing the Boeing Company here tonight is Mr. Leo Brooks, Vice President, National Security and Space Group of Government Operations. And Leo, would you stand up and be recognized, please? It's important to note that none of these programs would be possible without sponsorship. So if we didn't have these sponsors, we wouldn't have the program. So we really are most appreciative of the support that we've had from Boeing over the years. One of the reasons for the success of the John H. Glenn Lecture is its namesake, who is here with us tonight. He has been for every program since the series began. Senator Glenn, thank you for all you have done for our country and for the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. Both you and Annie have supported many projects and activities here at the museum over the years. At programs and educational events, you have inspired people of all ages to learn about the history of flight. Your dedication to education, particularly the STEM disciplines of science, technology, engineering, and math, will help ensure America remains competitive in its commitment to the future space exploration. Beginning with the centennial of the Wright brothers' flight in 2003, there have been a series of anniversaries marking the first uses of aircraft by different branches of the armed forces. The museum has participated in all of these occasions, and this year we are recognizing the Marine Corps. In January, we opened Fly Marines, Centennial of Marine Corps Aviation 1912 to 2012. Presented in partnership with the National Museum of the Marine Corps, the exhibition features 91 works of art by Marine artists, many of them painted in combat situations. Since January, we've incorporated the marine aviation theme into our programs, including tonight's lecture. I'm proud to say we have an all-Marine lineup this evening. Both Senator Glenn and our speaker began their distinguished careers in the front lines as skilled and courageous Marine aviators. To get the program started, it's my great honor and privilege to introduce one of America's great heroes, Senator John Glenn.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You know, it's a pleasure to be here on this special occasion, the 9th anniversary. Hard to believe that we've been doing these now for 9 years. Next year will be our 10th anniversary. Hard to believe on that one. But you know, if you think about our country and compared to other countries around the world, our history shows that we moved ahead more rapidly in many different areas than other nations around the world. And there were reasons for that. I think education became for everybody in this country. We put more emphasis on research. We learned the new, and with an educated citizenry and a little bit of investment, and away we went. And it's almost unbelievable that this country went from 2 or 3 million people along the East Coast to a world leader in just about 125 years, which I don't think has ever happened before in history. As an example of that, in 1903, the Wright brothers launched the air age with their achievements at Kitty Hawk. In just a few years, wasn't many years, before airplanes were being pressed into service by the military. Remember Rickenbacker and setting new records of combat in Europe at that time. My dad was in World War I, remembered talked to me about airplanes that he saw flying overhead. And that was only about 13, 14 years after maybe 15 years after the Wright brothers. So we went ahead very, very rapidly in those days, and it was only about another 59 years we did orbital flight, and 66 years Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. It was an almost unbelievable progression. This year we're celebrating the centennial of marine aviation, as Jack said. And our speaker has a 34-year career in the Marine Corps. And for 14 of those years, he served as with NASA's astronauts. When I began to fly in 1942, the prospect of space flight just wasn't there yet. Nobody had any concepts of that. There were books that touted what Buck Rogers would do, or Flash Gordon, or somebody like that. And I see a few smiles here. Some of you read those same things when I did. And we thought things like, there were little jokes, and I don't remember the joke. I remember the punchline at the end: "Take it once more around, Buck Rogers. Flash Gordon's on final." Well, that was a joke in those days until I was on a space flight where we were 20 seconds from saying go around again and land at Edwards because the weather was bad at the Cape. Take it once around again. Charlie, I don't know, and you're on 4 flights. I don't know whether you had to go around again or not on that, but had delay. But that just shows how fast we went ahead in this country. There was no such word as astronaut. Hadn't been invented yet because nobody had done any of that. We didn't need a word for that because nobody was even contemplating doing that at that time. And yet by 1959, when I was accepted into the Mercury program, human spaceflight was on the verge of reality. Although the training I received in the astronaut corps was arduous, I think the Marine Corps background that we're talking about here this year was particularly good training for going into space, just for the aspect of it being arduous training and the experience you have in combat or in doing test pilot work that we did in the Marine Corps and that Charlie did also. These are things that I think were pretty good training for what we were looking at in the astronaut program in the early days. And our speaker tonight traveled somewhat that same path that I did, although began his career a couple of decades after I did. Hate to believe I'm that much older than Charlie, but I guess I have to face facts. Charlie was born in Columbia, South Carolina in '46. When he graduated from high school, he received an appointment to the Naval Academy, received a degree in electrical engineering and science. He was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps. 1970, became a naval aviator. And I think most people here probably know, but maybe not everyone, that all Marine pilots go through naval aviation training, Naval Aviation Flight School, and then get their commissions in the Marine Corps. But as a naval aviator, he flew more than 100 combat missions in North and South Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia, based out of Thailand much of that time. Upon returning to the States, General Bolden served in a number of positions in the Marine Corps. He was selected as an astronaut candidate in 1980, remained in the astronaut corps until 1994, when he returned to active duty as a deputy commandant of midshipmen at the Naval Academy. Now, I want to stress that because they don't just pick anybody off the list for assignment. For those jobs to head up the sections of that run the students at the Naval Academy. They just don't do that. They pick people not only for their past record, but also as people they think will be a role model for those people that they're overseeing over there. And Charlie was selected for that position. He went out of that being commanding general later on in support of Operation Desert Thunder in Kuwait. He retired from the military in '94. But his career as an astronaut is as distinguished as his career in the Corps. He traveled into orbit 4 times aboard the Space Shuttle, and he was commander of 2 of those missions. His missions included deployment of the Hubble Space Telescope, and we walked by there just a few moments ago of the Hubble, that full-size vision of the Hubble out there. And you can, if anybody ever asks you what the size of the cargo bay was on the shuttle, you can tell them exactly that size. It was built to fit the cargo bay with just a few inches here and there of spare size. And so Charlie was the one who put Hubble up, and that mission has wound up through the years as revolutionizing the books on astronomy, because we've learned so much from that. Also was on the first U.S.-Russian joint mission. So he's had a very distinguished record. Through the years, we had a lot of things happen in the space program. We've talked about some of them here before in previous lectures and meetings here. Some very controversial things, as a matter of fact. In 2004, in the previous administration, it was decided to cancel the shuttle. And so it was against that background in 2009, it canceled the shuttle by 2010, which happened. And it was against that kind of background that in 2009 he was appointed by President Barack Obama to be the 12th administrator of NASA. It was a great position to be in and a difficult position to be in. And he's to be complimented for the work he's done there. So it's my great pleasure to introduce the administrator of NASA, our good friend, the Honorable Charles Bolden. Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
Annie, good to see you always. Senator Glenn, thank you so very much for the very kind introduction. He told me he was just going to come up and say, okay, he has 3 beautiful granddaughters. They're soon to be 6, one's 9 and one's 12, and say, here's Charlie. But he didn't do that, and I really appreciate it. You know, I'll tell you one story. I do have prepared remarks, okay? I know you're looking, don't start telling stories. I have one quick story. And it's, you know, without knowing it, I have been following Jackie, my wife, and I have been following John and Annie Glenn, sort of using them as role models, unintended as it may be. And if you, there is an article recently written about their love affair. And I think it is absolutely incredible, particularly in this day and age, when, you know, love affairs I don't know, they're just not like it used to be. But Jackie and I met, well, we met before, but we became acquainted with each other at the age of 3. Our families were good friends. My mom and dad and Jackie's mom and dad had gone to high school together in Columbia, South Carolina, and then off to college and came back, and they all became teachers. But as the story goes, I'm telling you, as the story goes, we were at the beach in South Carolina, and my father told Jackie's father to save that one for Charles. And that was me. And that was Jackie. So we went to kindergarten together, and we were apart for elementary school, but then back together for junior high and high school, and then apart for college, and then we married when we both graduated from college. As the story goes, John and Annie have been together since they were 2. And we talk about it because I think they actually shared a crib. And I'm not going any farther in that. But you know, it's amazing how my background, being somebody who never dreamed of going to space, would so end up following an incredible role model like Senator Glenn. And Senator, I do thank you very much for everything that you've done for the nation and also for me personally. So thank you very much. I also want to thank General Daly and the team here at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. And it is just an incredible job that you do of hosting us all the time that we come over. Your hospitality is always so warm, and you make everybody feel like this is their home, and I think that's the intent. Somebody asked me earlier tonight, you know, what was it that made General Daly who he is and as good as he is? And I said, well, first thing is a Marine. That was easy, and I said that was good prep for this job. Senator Glenn said it again, and we are all proud of being Marines because that common heritage is what makes us who we are. And I'm babbling here because I want to talk about very quickly a ceremony that I attended earlier today, because I am a somewhat unique individual, and all of us stand on the shoulders of giants. I think anybody would say that, but I'm especially blessed because I had the opportunity to attend a Congressional Gold Medal ceremony this afternoon for a group of men, the Montford Point Marines. And not many of you have ever heard of them, but I am here today because of them. During the days of the segregated military, back in 1941, the President of the United States issued an executive order that said we were going to integrate the military. And so, not wanting to do that, the establishment said, okay, we'll do what he said, kinda. And so, African-American young men who wanted to fly airplanes went to a place called Moton Field in Tuskegee, Alabama, and made history as the Tuskegee Airmen. Young men who wanted to just get down and dirty and be grunts and be Marines and go to war went to a place called Montford Point Camp in the backwoods of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and trained there. And they trained there and took abuse and everything, and they were finally recognized for their contributions to this nation today by receipt of a Congressional Gold Medal. About 18,000 of them went through training at Montford Point Camp, and today there are about 440 of them living. So I'm so glad that we were able to capture them before there were none left. So if I get emotional as I talk about things today, it's because I'm humbled by being here, first of all. And I'm even more humbled by the fact that I had an opportunity to be with my heroes this afternoon, the Montford Point Marines. I also want to salute a person who is here. Joe, where are you? Dr. Joe Allen. He probably ate and left. No, he didn't. Dr. Joe Allen up there was my very first office mate when I got down to Houston to become an astronaut. I didn't have a clue what I was getting myself into. I had never wanted to go to space, and I will talk a little bit about it in a few minutes, but I ended up in Houston in the astronaut office, and they shuffled me into this office, and I had 3 roommates at the time, didn't we, Joe? Dr. Joe Allen, first and foremost, Dr. Bill Thornton, and who else did we have in there, Joe? Didn't stay long. No, you, me, Bill Thornton, and forgot. I think I drove him away. But they were all veterans, and Joe kind of took me under his wing. Joe was my racquetball partner. Joe taught me to play handball, tried, but I couldn't play with my left hand, so I was never any good there. Taught me how to play squash and taught me how to be an astronaut. And we celebrate Joe's 75th birthday today. Earlier tonight, we sang happy birthday to him. But Joe and his lovely wife, Bonnie, are back there, and I just want to thank you all for coming out, particularly Bonnie for bringing him out on his 75th birthday when you could have been partying somewhere and having a good time. So thank you all. It's always been a pleasure for me to come here to the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, and it's home to so many of the artifacts from our nation's leadership in space and aeronautics. It's a living history, as any of you know if you come here, because we continue to innovate and reach to farther horizons. I'm also delighted to speak at a lecture honoring my esteemed colleague, Senator John Glenn, who just last month was recognized with a well-deserved Presidential Medal of Freedom for his extraordinary service to our country. When John first flew, he not only undertook a dangerous mission, he personified America's dreams, what we believed we could be. Through his unflappable nature and his confidence, he helped us believe in what we could achieve. I know that right here in this very theater, this museum showed live launch coverage of John's second historic flight back in 1998 on the Space Shuttle Discovery, as he once again made history, this time as the oldest person to fly in space. And John has told me I'm not quite ready yet. He is a data point of 1. He and I always talk about data points because we really believe that we need to get as much use out of the International Space Station as we can as a national laboratory. I've got a little bit to go. He says the window is 70 to 90. So in 4 years, I'll be in the window. Joe Allen is already 75 years old. Joe's volunteered. General Daly's volunteered. Senator Glenn has volunteered to be the commander of our crew. So we have a crew of 4 that's ready to go on any commercial vehicle whenever they're ready to give them 4 more data points. And they will never see a crew like that ever again. Anybody ever see Space Cowboys? You just said that, huh? Okay, all right, it's great. I told them we're ready. We're going to continue building on Senator Glenn's legacy as we reach toward new destinations and build new capabilities for exploration. Just a month ago, at this time, the Dragon capsule was making history as the first space vehicle built by a private company not intended specifically for government purchase to visit the International Space Station. There are many more exciting days ahead, not only in commercial space, but as NASA continues to launch science missions that rewrite history, develop cutting-edge aeronautics technologies, and build the rocket and crew vehicle that will take astronauts to an asteroid, Mars, and perhaps other deep space destinations. Back in April, we transferred to the Smithsonian the Space Shuttle Discovery, on which John flew, while its sister ship Enterprise went to New York City's intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum. We're delighted to share the achievements of the Space Shuttle program with millions of visitors, many of whom will doubtless become the exploration leaders of tomorrow. At the same time, we're very attached to this fleet of vehicles, probably the most amazing machines ever built, on which we've flown millions of miles and accomplished so much. So in a way, as a fellow flyer aboard Discovery, I feel like part of me is on permanent display out at the Hudvar-Hazy Center as well. That's a good thing. The shuttle gave our nation many firsts, many proud moments. I was fortunate to fly on it for 4 times and be part of 2 very historic achievements aboard Discovery. The deployment of the Hubble Space Telescope on STS-31 in 1990, which has redefined our perception of the universe, and the first US-Russian mission, STS-60 in 1994, that presaged the unprecedented international cooperation we've achieved since then on the International Space Station. And yes, that's me. I know many of you are going, who is that young-looking guy? I also flew on Columbia and Atlantis. Atlantis joined Discovery and Endeavour as the transport for the subsequent servicing missions to Hubble that extended this unique resource and enhanced the great observatory's capabilities. Among those many historic achievements of the shuttle was the deployment of the Chandra X-ray Observatory that, among other things, documented the largest supernova ever witnessed. The shuttle also deployed the Magellan probe to Venus. Many of the Tracking and Data Relay, or TDRS satellites, were also deployed from the shuttle. NASA uses these satellites to maintain contact from the space station, and with government agencies, and other government agencies also use them for satellite communications. We also deployed communication satellites for many other countries from the shuttle. STS-41C brought us the capture and repair of the Solar Maximum satellite, the first repair of a satellite on orbit. And of course, we constructed one of the world's true engineering marvels, the International Space Station itself, using the shuttle. The shuttle program also taught us hard lessons. The tragic losses of Challenger and Columbia crews were extraordinarily painful for the nation and for those of us who knew these brave explorers personally. Space travel is hard and unforgiving. It's always been and always will be. There's never going to be zero risk. When you're breaking the bonds of gravity, that's just part of the deal. But tonight, I want to talk about my own recollections as a traveler to space, and perhaps reflect on the greater significance of the space program to our nation and the world. Some of the mementos, things we've accomplished, and where we're headed next. I have to tell you that space was never really in my sights as a youngster. I wasn't one of those kids who dreamed of being an astronaut. Even though John Glenn and the Mercury 7 and later the Gemini and Apollo astronauts were doing amazing things, the stuff that was discussed at dinner tables and water coolers as well as in the halls of power, I was focused on public service. I wanted to join the military and serve as my father and uncles had done in World War II. They served with distinction, but not always recognition because of their race. It was a different world back then in the segregated South and in South Carolina. And the thought that I would be the first African-American administrator of our nation's space program under the nation's first black president would have seemed as much science fiction as the idea that an orbiting outpost with a football field's worth of solar arrays would have had people living and working aboard it continuously from Russia, the US, and many other nations for more than 11 years now. But the future doesn't always wait for us to embrace it, does it? It's coming at us, and we can certainly try to prepare for our involvement, but the momentum is always there. Today, we are at a once-in-a-generation turning point. It may be even bigger than that as we transition from a phenomenal 30-year flagship program in the Space Shuttle to an entirely new way of doing business. Next slide. It's particularly exciting for me and for us to really be focusing on the technologies and the aerospace field that the aerospace field has broadly agreed for years we would need to get farther into the solar system. It's not overstating it to say that right now we're opening a new chapter in the space age. NASA's role has historically been crucial in seeding the technology and innovations that brought our nation's capabilities to the cutting edge, made America the world's leader in space exploration, and made a difference in everyday lives. The agency's impact on our nation's technological future, the workforce, and the economy are based on investments and innovations that we had the courage to make. Today, our space technology program has about 1,000 projects developing the technologies we need for tomorrow's missions. In the nation's laboratories and the test chambers, NASA is driving advances in new high-payoff space technologies and developing and maturing broadly applicable technology in areas such as in-space propulsion, robotics, space power systems, deep space communications, cryogenic fuel handling and entry, descent, and landing, which are essential for exploration beyond low Earth orbit. When we invest in technology for space, we spend that money right here on Earth, creating high-tech jobs, capabilities, and products that help our nation maintain its global economic leadership. As part of that focus on the future, we're also building a rocket that will take astronauts deeper into space than ever before. Orion, the vehicle in which they'll travel, has undergone water tests, parachute drop tests, and a lot of work on its thermal protection material. We plan to fly a test flight as early as 2014. I'm going to show you a chart, I think, that shows you the relative sizes of Saturn V, a shuttle, and our new rocket in two different configurations. So you can see we're going for something quite new and spectacular. If you come from Saturn on your left to shuttle to the Space Launch System, as we call it, or the Heavy Lift Launch Vehicle, the first being Phase 1, which is a 70 metric ton vehicle, growing to be able to carry 130 or 150 metric tons, that's carrying planetary missions in science or astronauts to Mars and asteroids and deep space destinations. At the same time, we've reached a point where we can turn over the path to low Earth orbit that government pioneered to our private industry partners. This will allow NASA to focus on those farther horizons we want to reach. Vehicles with names like Cygnus, Dragon, Dream Chaser are at the vanguard of this new innovative push by industry. Our science missions are working in partnership with exploration so that the things we learn will support future missions with astronauts. The Dawn mission has recently visited the asteroid Vesta, for instance. The first time we've orbited one of these ancient rocks, and it sent us a lot of surprising data that we'll take into account as we work toward a human mission to an asteroid. As we review our Mars program, we'll be looking at ways that science and exploration can work together to make the most of our missions so that we can continue to make discoveries that rewrite textbooks while supporting the first human boots on the red planet. NASA has been blessed throughout its life with support from across the political spectrum. There's something about exploration that crosses political boundaries, just as surely as those disappear when the Earth is seen from space. The public support, not only in dollars, but also in attitudes, in willingness to believe in something that seemed almost impossible. That was a big part of what made space travel possible. With the leadership of President Kennedy and a courageous core of space pioneers like John Glenn, it became something we had to do as a nation. The Cold War was a motivator, of course, but I believe we still would have explored without it. We were on the cusp of so many technological developments and discoveries. Our robotic probes like Explorer, Ranger, and Mariner were revolutionizing our understanding of outer space, the moon, Mars, and Venus, even as John and the rest of the astronauts made history as the first humans in space. I might note that a replica of Explorer 1, our first satellite, is hanging outside this very theater in the Milestones of Flight Gallery. A replica of Ranger hangs on the east side of the museum, and an engineering model of the Surveyor moonlander hangs near that. NASA was also busy pioneering the technologies needed for whole new industries and services at a time, and then handing those capabilities on to commercial spaceflight. Communication satellites like ECHO, for instance, helped lead the commercial satellites. And meteorology satellites like TIRUS led to a series currently operated by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Then, of course, Apollo missions tested spacecraft in Earth and moon orbit and visited the moon 6 times, studying soil, mechanics, meteoroids, and questions about seismic activity, heat flow, magnetic fields, and solar winds. Even when an oxygen tank explosion forced Apollo 13 to scrub its lunar landing, the can-do, problem-solving attitude of crew and mission control turned the mission into a successful failure. Today, the International Space Station continues as the core of our human spaceflight efforts, an amazing showcase for human ingenuity and a unique scientific resource like no other the world has ever seen. It's going to help us understand a lot of human health issues we'll need to get our arms around before traveling farther into space. It will also allow us to demonstrate some of the technologies that we'll need. Now that it's complete, we're ramping up our utilization by many different types of groups, from government agencies to academia and industry. Led by the U.S. in partnership with Russian, Japanese, European, Canadian partners, the ISS is the most complex space facility ever built. It carries almost 1 million pounds of hardware, spans more than the length of a football field, and has an interior volume greater than a 747. It travels 17,500 miles an hour, orbiting the Earth 16 times a day, with an international crew of 6 actively participating in over 100 research investigations at any time. So don't let anybody tell you that the U.S. has walked away from human spaceflight. Every research investigation and all of the systems that keep the ISS operational helps us figure out how to improve life here on Earth as we prepare to explore farther from our planet. Effective reliance on solar power and onboard water processing are just 2 examples of how we're learning to better operate a spacecraft independent of resources resupplied from Earth. Developing these necessities for living and working on board the ISS is enabling us to figure out how to better use renewable sources of resources on Earth and how to do things like provide clean water to people living in undeveloped countries, and oh, by the way, even in some states here in the United States. Now, when I graduated from the Naval Academy, we were on the cusp of landing humans on the moon. A lot of my colleagues, naval aviators, went on to pursue careers with NASA, but it still wasn't on my radar, so to speak. It wasn't until I began to see the recruitment efforts in the 1970s of people like Nichelle Nichols, television's Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, that I realized how committed NASA was to diversifying the astronaut corps and really taking the shuttle program in a whole new direction. It was while I was a test pilot at the Naval Air Test Center at Patuxent River, Maryland, that I met the late, great Dr. Ron McNair, who convinced me that I needed to apply to the astronaut program. My very strong logical case for not applying was simply that I didn't think I'd be selected. Ron made short work of that argument when he told me, and he looked me right in the eye and he said, "That's the dumbest thing I ever heard." He said, "How do you know? How do you know if you don't ask?" And so for the young people in the audience, and I see a lot of you probably getting tired, and I'm almost done, okay? How do you know unless you ask? Dream big dreams, believe in yourselves, study really, really, really hard, and ask. We lost Ron on Challenger, but his influence in my life continues today. Certainly, traveling to space has changed my life. I think we travel to space not only because it's human nature to explore, but also because it's our nature to expand the number of places we can live, to expand the reach of the human race. We've now effectively extended our biosphere to space, and there hasn't been a time, I want you to hear this, there has not been a time in the past 11 years when all of us human beings have lived on this planet at the same time. Not a single second when all of us human beings have lived on this planet at the same time. America has been in space for almost 12 years continuously without interruption. And you should be very proud of that, and you should brag of that, and you should push back when anybody tries to tell you that we're walking away from exploration and walking away from human spaceflight. Because as we said when I was growing up in South Carolina, it just ain't so. Trust me. That's pretty amazing, but it also gives us a responsibility to do more than just take fantastic pictures or awe people with the smoke and flames of a launch, as spectacular as those may be. NASA has one of the most dedicated workforces around, and we're on a mission. Not just the specific one at hand, but a mission to uncover new knowledge so that what we learn and do can benefit all humankind. My time in space taught me many things, but even before the space station was constructed, our exploration efforts from Apollo, Soyuz, to the Shuttle Mir and shuttle missions with the international crews were teaching us how to be global citizens. Space exploration is something we do as nations together. We don't always have the same goals up there, but we can do it all peacefully. I was privileged to command the first shuttle mission with a Russian cosmonaut on board, and I confess that it was humbling and not initially inviting for me to face my preconceptions of what it would be like to work with someone who was ostensibly at one time my enemy. But when you live and train with someone for 2 years and you get to know their family, well, let's just say it's hard to look at them in the same way again. That man, Sergei Konstantinovich Krikalev, and his family have become lifelong friends to my family and me. Today, he leads the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center outside Moscow in Russia. So for me, space is not just a destination. It's not just something about which I can say, I've been there, one of the lucky few. It encompasses a way of approaching our biggest problems, a way of looking at our world differently and thinking how to solve and how to strive to our highest potential. How to work together as nations. While our space program began in competition, it has now become an international collaboration. Space is a uniter. It's hard not to feel connected when you see our shared planet below looking fragile in the great blackness, but free of political boundaries, seeing only those created by nature such as rivers, oceans, and mountain ranges. If everyone could view our world from space, they'd see how we're all in this life together on a marvelous globe that needs our stewardship. It changes you forever. It has made me want to dedicate my life to helping other people get there. Today, that door to space is opening wider. With the recent success of SpaceX, becoming the first entity outside of a government to successfully send a cargo capsule to the International Space Station and retrieve it intact, we're at the start of something new and big and really exciting. We're opening up an entirely new segment of the economy at the same time as we're making space more accessible, more a part of our daily lives than it has ever been before. There are spaceports all around the world, a few right here in the U.S., and I believe that many more people will be taking to the stars in the future as researchers, tourists, students, and representatives of a globally spacefaring people. NASA received more than 6,300 applicants during our most recent call for astronauts earlier this year. That's the second highest number we've ever received. So I don't think interest in space has waned. The young people I talk to around the world are passionate about our future. It's one of the things that gives me great hope. To think that my granddaughters, my beautiful granddaughters, may witness the first humans on Mars, or even better, as my oldest granddaughter, the rocket scientist, likes to say, may be among those pioneers actually making that mission themselves. I believe it's an attainable achievement in many of our lifetimes. When I look through this audience, most of you, I believe, will see humans on Mars. With a president who has urged us to develop the technologies that will be required to get us there, and a growing fascination with the accomplishments of NASA and its many partners in space, deep space exploration with humans is within our grasp. When the Curiosity rover lands on Mars in August, it's going to be another incredible milestone. I know here at Air and Space, one of the most popular things you had going after the Mars exploration rovers landed was the evolving display of the incredible images from those plucky little vehicles. And that same kind of excitement is going to happen again with Curiosity, beginning in August. It's going to visit a new place on the Martian surface, a hard-to-reach place near a mountain range, and the arrival will demonstrate the precision landing technologies we'll need to land future missions on other planetary bodies. Then we'll have this laboratory about the size of a small car. I see you just... I love it.
Sorry.
That's all right. If your heart's pumping, that's good. That's good. Because you're going to be doing this stuff. We'll have a small laboratory about the size of a small car, like a Mini Cooper or a Volkswagen, roving all over the planet with the most sophisticated suite of instruments ever to evaluate whether Mars might have ever been habitable to life. Certainly among the biggest questions mankind has ever considered are we alone? Is there life elsewhere in the universe? These are questions that have captured the curiosity of humankind since the beginning of time. At the same time as Curiosity sends back what is sure to be an incredible data from Mars, we'll also still be orbiting Mercury and Saturn and on our way to Jupiter and Pluto. Just 2 weeks ago, we launched NuSTAR, a black hole spotter. Kepler has discovered hundreds of planets around stars and other solar systems and continues to do its work. Hubble keeps transforming our view of cosmic phenomena. And the James Webb Space Telescope, its successor, is preparing for a 2018 launch. That telescope's first instrument just arrived at Goddard Space Flight Center a couple of weeks ago, and the project has been meeting its many structural, technical, and spending milestones. The Webb telescope's launch will be a first as we send it to a point 1 million miles away from Earth on a hunt for light from the earliest days in our universe. Right now, many of our Earth scientists are gearing up for hurricane season. The Aquarius mission recently released the first map of global ocean salinity. We certainly haven't lost sight of our home planet as we extend our reach throughout the solar system and look beyond it. So today, there may be budget squabbles up the street in that big dome building, but at NASA, we're still in the future business, so we take the long-term view. When you're preparing an instrument to peer back billions of years or developing the technology that will rocket humans at tens of thousands of miles an hour to destinations they've never before visited, or studying the mysteries of the sun and how it affects our planet, well, you can get lost in the magnitude of our work, and today's problems may seem like not such a big deal. It's been my great honor to be a part of a mission that deployed the Hubble Space Telescope, one of the greatest scientific instruments of all time, and to be part of a corps that flew an experimental vehicle, that incredible flying machine, the Space Shuttle, for 3 decades, continually refining it and bringing into existence something that the world hadn't seen before. A reusable space vehicle, which some of our commercial partners will now also be developing. Because NASA pioneered such a thing, they can follow in our footsteps. There are legacies like these all across our space program. People and technologies. Among this nation's greatest legacies, and legacies may be the wrong word, because we're not stopping anytime soon. These achievements represent the jump start we gave to a global exploration enterprise. These achievements helped turn what was a global competition, into global cooperation. Today, we remain at the forefront as leader of this massive effort. I was privileged to be at the events earlier this year celebrating the 50th anniversary of John Glenn's first orbital flight. And he talks about how at each stage of the path we learn something. The research is always important, and incorporating what we've done to make it to the next level will always be critical. Enhancing our utilization of the International Space Station is one of John's passions, as well as one of mine. This is a challenge we must meet to enable realization of many of our exploration dreams and visions. Today's space program is vital and alive. It's led by men and women who are passionately dedicated to space and keeping America the leader in its exploration and expanding. John Glenn's legacy is the food on which we feed. They're across this nation and around the world, working on the next phase of a global space exploration enterprise that those first astronauts and scientists and engineers and many thousands of people who supported them helped to make possible. It's been my honor to be a part of our nation's greatest successes and to help shepherd NASA to its next destinations. There are many bright days ahead for the nation's space program and for civilization's progress into space. I hope every one of you here tonight is as excited and passionate. I know I have one. I hope every one of you, though, is as excited and passionate as I am about ensuring that we realize every potential of our times. My thanks again, General Daly, to you and to the Smithsonian for this opportunity. John, to you for honoring me by allowing me to be a Glenn lecturer, and for the role that the Smithsonian, the incredible role that they have played in the promotion of exploration and keeping the dream alive. God bless each one of you, and may God bless the good old USA. Thank you. I have been told that I have a few minutes that I can take. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks so much. I've been told that I can take a few questions if you have them. I'd ask you to yell it out, and then I'll repeat the question so that everybody knows what I'm attempting to answer, okay? And I say that, attempting to answer. Even my driver can answer most of these questions. John's driver will answer most of them since he's the expert in this crowd, all right? Question over there.
Recent on the internet, or there have been reports about how the NRO donated 2 telescopes to NASA. Do you guys have any concrete plans for launching them, or what's the story?
The question was, we recently acquired by gift essentially the makings of 2 telescopes from the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Organization. And he was asking if we had definitive plans for their employment yet. We do not. We accepted them because there is great promise of what they can do. Just as we've done with our Mars exploration program, where we've gone out to the public, we've gone to academia, industry, and other people and said, you know, what should a Mars program look like for the United States and our international partners in the future? We're now collaborating with the science community because there are a lot of things that they have great hope that we will be able to do. A lot of things depend on funding, but that's not something that we're planning for right now. So you're probably going to see us start talking about them a couple of budget cycles down the road. So don't go writing to Congress and saying give NASA more money. I do need it, but I don't need it for that. All right. So, but they are very promising, and we'll determine what we're going to do with them soon. We hope. Yes.
So, from an internal viewpoint, I think there's some things that go on at NASA centers that public don't realize, and that I work at a center where it's an interesting divide within NASA between Earth science and planetary science, particularly with budget issues.
Yeah.
Big thing going on is that we have our 40th anniversary of Landsat coming up, and I'm just wondering how you would get NASA to be more of a cohesive whole again, instead of that great divide that I see personally working there.
The question here was from an internal point of view, working at a NASA center, she sees a divide between communities, earth science, space science. I talked about human space flight and science, period. The one thing that I think you will see us doing today, we are trying to think strategically, and we're trying to think of where the nation wants us to be 30 years from now. And the other thing that we're doing is we're trying to become relevant to the needs of the people of the nation. And I think you heard me say earlier, you know, our vision, if I paraphrase it, is we reach for new heights, for greater heights, to reveal the unknown so that what we learn and what we do makes life better for humankind. Earth science plays a critical role in everything that we do. And I think if you look at the budget, because you have to say, okay, what is it that you're emphasizing? You go to the budget. And if you look at the budget, earth science has been healthy and healthier. We have a president who is very interested in Earth and its preservation, and so you find that we're putting much more emphasis on earth science than we have done in recent years. But there has to be collaboration between the two. We can't know what we need to know about Earth unless we study other planets and asteroids. People say, why do you care about an asteroid? I mentioned Vesta earlier. As an Earth scientist, if that's what you are, you probably are hungry for data from Vesta, because we're finding that this asteroid, this rock, is what we thought it was. We now are starting to slowly lean toward classifying it as a, what do we call it, a microplanet or a small planet or a dwarf planet, because we're seeing the signs of past tectonic activity. If we can understand from space science what happened to things like older planets and asteroids and the like, we can hopefully keep from making some of those mistakes that humans might cause, that would cause us to end up like a Vesta, which we would not want to do. So I think you're going to find, hopefully what you're going to see is that there's much more collaboration among the Earth scientists and the space scientists and among human and robotic spaceflight. That's what we're striving for. There was a question back there.
Yes. Some of the European scientists who are concerned about the status of some of the joint missions to Mars that are coming up. What is the status of missions to Mars, international missions over the next decade? Is NASA a reliable international partner?
Good question. The question is, the basic question was, are we a reliable international partner? The preface for all that was, he's talked to a lot of his friends in the European Space Agency and other places, and they're concerned because NASA has had to not continue work with them in some things that we were thinking about doing. I think we're an incredibly reliable partner. And the collaboration between the U.S., NASA, being the space arm of the U.S., between the U.S. and our international partners remains very robust. If you look at the James Webb Space Telescope that I mentioned, that is a partnership between the Europeans, the Canadians, the United States. We're going to launch it on an Ariane spacecraft. So that is something that's out in the future that remains intact. If you look at what we're trying to do with the Mars program as we try to restructure our Mars program, we had a workshop in Houston 2 weeks ago, and we had an abundance of international partners who came in, people representing the academia, the science community, industry, all trying to give us ideas on what would a Mars program look like given today's budgetary environment. So our international partners are vital to everything that we do, and particularly in the Mars program. So I think you'll see. We've committed to support them with the program called ExoMars, which we were not able to fully stay in the way that we were thinking about, but we've committed a communications orbiter to them for that 2016 mission that they're trying to fly. And because we need it ourselves, we have also committed to provide our expertise in entry, descent, and landing, because it's only the United States that has ever successfully landed something on another planet. And we know how to do that. We're trying to help others learn how to do it. So we'll continue to be a part of their programs. Way in the back, last row back there.
I'm just wondering, you spoke about private enterprise getting to orbit. What's NASA's vision on private enterprise beyond orbit?
Oh, what's NASA's vision on private enterprise beyond orbit? We're really working hard on what we can do to enable private industry to follow in our footsteps as far as they can. There are some private companies that have visions of, because and I need to explain this. I'm not developing commercial space, okay? Please get that straight. NASA is facilitating the success of a commercial enterprise if that's where you want to go, okay? If the American taxpayer and investors and entrepreneurs want to go there, we can make them successful. We can help them be successful. But my job is not to build the industry. I am a facilitator. We have met with great success so far in our commercial cargo program. We're hoping that Orbital will fly their first flight coming up here this fall. SpaceX has already flown their demonstration. The next time they fly, it'll be for pay. It'll be for contract, and that's what we're trying to do. We're working with a number of American-led companies that are trying to develop vehicles that can carry humans to orbit. We need that badly to support the International Space Station. Senator Glenn and I were talking earlier. We need to be able to get a larger crew up there than we have right now, because we need people who will tend to the care and feeding of the International Space Station while researchers go off and do their work. One of the problems we have now with a crew of 6 is that we aren't able to get as much research in as we would like to do. So we're looking for ways to enhance the utilization of the International Space Station. If we have private industry that wants to colonize the moon, and if you follow the space program, you'll know that there are a number of private companies that are looking into ways that they can do an elaborate number of things, and we support that, and we will do everything that we can to facilitate their success. But we don't visualize or envision making private industry do things beyond low Earth orbit. If they want to do it, we're happy and we'll support them. Question right there.
What advice do you have for future astronauts?
Oh, what advice do I have for you as a future astronaut? It's very simple. You know, I wish I could tell you something, you know, I could give you some magic potion, but it's what my mom and dad told me. You got to study your little tail off. I mean, you have to study hard. What do you study? Everything. Take math and science. They're absolutely critical. Challenge yourself every step along the way. Don't get focused on A's. Get focused on knowledge. You know, take the difficult courses. Work really hard. If you're an athlete or a musician or anything else, do the same focus in the classroom that you do when you're on the sports field. Separate them. Don't worry about sports when you're in academics. Don't worry about academics when you're in sports. We need well-rounded human beings, so I need for you to be an athlete, and I need for you to be a musician, but I also need for you to be a critical thinker. And finally, don't be afraid of failure. Space travel is difficult and dangerous. I have lived through the loss of 2 groups of friends and 2 vehicles. John's been through 3. And so, you know, we have suffered through triumph and tragedy. They go together. You can't have one without the other. There is no triumph without tragedy, without people willing to take risks. So those are the 3 things I tell you. Study hard, work really hard, and don't be afraid of failure. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do something. Okay? How old are you? 12? I love it. That's my granddaughter. That's my oldest that's not my oldest granddaughter, but I need to introduce you to my oldest granddaughter, who's 12, and she's the rocket scientist. She doesn't talk about going to space, but she wants to build rockets so people can go to space. And I'm incredibly proud. Maybe 2 more questions, one way back up in the back there, and then I'll take one right here. Say one more, I know it's something about a future Marine, but what advice would I have for a future Marine? Study hard, work hard, do not accept failure, and get in shape. Okay? Not just physical shape, but get in shape in your head. You know, just get ready to take anything anybody throws at you, because that's kind of the way it is. You know, it's a little bit tougher than being an astronaut, but you can do it. Okay? Last question. Oh, what I pointed to somebody, and I apologize. Was it you? Yes. I'm sorry.
I know that the Kepler team right now is almost inundated with information coming in, and that they put some of that online, and they've been able to crowdsource a lot of input into where they can find exoplanets. Do you have any other ideas of how the public can be engaged in the science?
I'm going to ask somebody, believe it or not, Becky, would you come up here for a minute? I don't know the answer. One of the things I learned a long time ago when I became the NASA administrator was don't pretend you know the answer to everything, because you don't. Becky is one of our experts in the communications department, so I'm going to ask her to answer your question.
And I'm going to give you the simplest answer possible. There's lots of stuff out there, but go to nasa.gov. It's all online. We have, if you are a student, there's a place to go for students. If you're a teacher, go to for teachers. For the public, there's for parents even. We've got all sorts of cool little sections of places where you can go to find what to do. And you can get involved if you are a big social media person. Come to one of our NASA socials, and you get amazing behind the scenes looks at what we do, plus you get to meet all these other cool social media folks. That's a great way to get involved. But go to nasa.gov, it's all on there. We put all of these opportunities online, and there are lots of ways for you to get involved. If you can't find them, give me a call.
Becky Ramsey.
Or Sarah.
Or Sarah. Sarah Rebecca. Thanks, Becky. The socials, that's what we call them now, right? Yes. Yeah. They used to be called tweet-ups, but they're now called socials. I see a lot of thumbs going up. If you do any kind of social media, you want to try to find a social. We're having them all over the country for the Curiosity landing. So at least August 4th and 5th. There's probably going to be some here. 4th, 5th, and 6th?
4th and the 5th, there's 6 NASA socials.
Okay, there's 6 NASA socials, but you can probably find it online again. Go to nasa.gov and look for all that stuff. One at Goddard. Are we doing one here?
We're not doing one at headquarters.
General Daly says he is now, so. I'm just kidding. I didn't say that. But really, I am very proud of the NASA website. It is an award-winning website. For those of you who follow social media and stuff like that and all that kind of stuff, we've won a number of Webbies. It's like an Academy Award for websites and stuff. And Becky and Bob Jacobs and David Weaver and the whole crew in communications do an absolutely incredible job. I am a hard taskmaster, so I always say it's not good enough, because we still have people who come up to me when I go places and say, why are we no longer in space? And why is NASA walking away from human spaceflight? And so if I didn't leave you with anything tonight, you know, I need you to be missionaries. I need for you to go out and you need to brag about what you do. Whether you work at NASA or not, you've heard me say this, right? I tell our NASA family all the time, they need to be proud of what they do. They need to go stick their chest out. They need to be Marines about NASA. You don't see any Marine who's bashful about talking about being a Marine. We're very proud of it because we know we're good. At NASA, we're very proud of it because we know we're good. We do stuff no one else can do, and we lead the world. And so I would ask you to go back home tomorrow or go to work or whatever it is and say, hey, I saw this lousy speaker, but he had good images, and he told me to go out and proselytize about exploration. And so if you do that, I will have been successful tonight. So thank you very much again for allowing me to come here and be with you tonight. Thanks so much for giving up your evening. Thanks again, General Daly. Senator Glenn, thank you very much for the honor of being here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, General Bolden. That was absolutely a terrific presentation. You really, accomplished more than we even hoped for tonight in terms of an update on NASA, a career that you have had, and tied the whole thing together and celebrated the Marine Centennial at the same time. You know, I might get, you're talking about the social activity that when NASA delivered Discovery to us, we had 4.9 billion impressions as a result of that, 375 million TV viewers. The Smithsonian got credit for that, but it was a NASA show.
It's a team.
So, well, and that's kind of the point, but there's a mark for you to go for when Curiosity lands. We have a poll now, let's try to beat that one. And you know, I have to just make one more comment about the thing about NASA is we often get questions in this theater, well, what has NASA actually done? In fact, we've had people who are talking on their cell phone, looking at their iPad and saying, what was it NASA contributed? And the thing is, NASA doesn't ever produce a product. They do fundamental research, and when it becomes ready for a product, somebody else's name goes on it. So we don't see big NASA signs around, but they're the foundation upon which everything in this country, from a technology standpoint, almost everything, has been done. So, and it's continuing, and the enthusiasm, obviously, for the program is a tremendous boost for all of us, I think, to hear that. So we have commemorated everything that you've done at NASA in this National Air and Space Museum and autobiography. We're very proud of this, and for those of you who would like to have one, they're on sale. And it is a bestseller right now, and it's along with the Jefferson Bible. We're running neck and neck right now for the best. But Charlie,
Thank you so much.
with our
Thank you, sir.
great appreciation for what you've done. Senator Glenn, Annie, we want to thank both of you for being here. We look forward to you being at the 10th in 2013. We'll save your seat right there. And again, Boeing, thank you very much. Leo, appreciate your support of this program and all the other things that you do for us. There will not be an opportunity for autographs tonight, so if you'll exit through the rear of the theater, there'll be people to guide you out. But thank you very much for supporting the program. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. And keep those cards and letters coming. Thanks very much, folks.